James Miller tugged at his tight collar, trying to stay calm in the massive crystalline hall aboard the alien diplomatic vessel. The room sparkled with natural light refracting through the transparent walls and ceiling, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the floor. As Earth's junior diplomat, he hadn't expected to be part of such a historic first contact dinner. The crystalline species, as humans had dubbed them, towered over the human delegation. Their bodies were semi-transparent, with inner cores that pulsed with different colors depending on their emotions. James found himself seated next to Admiral Thompson, who kept whispering reminders about proper protocol. Remember, Miller, one wrong move could set back human-alien relations by decades, Thompson muttered, his face tight with concern. The dinner started smoothly enough. The human delegation marveled at the floating serving plates made of living crystal, each carrying strange but beautiful food items. James noticed that while the humans were served familiar Earth dishes, their hosts consumed what appeared to be raw minerals and crystal formations. The high matriarch of the crystalline species sat at the head of the table, her form nearly 15 feet tall even while seated. Her inner core gleamed with a deep blue light that filled the room with a calm presence. Next to her sat an empty chair, which seemed odd given the formal nature of the event. As the dinner progressed, James found himself growing increasingly thirsty. The alien atmosphere, while breathable, was drier than Earth's. His water glass had been empty for several minutes, and the servers seemed busy attending to the main course. That's when he noticed it. A beautiful crystal chalice sitting unattended near his plate. It was filled with what looked like clear water, catching and reflecting the light in mesmerizing patterns. Without thinking, James reached for it. Miller, no. Thompson's warning came too late. The moment James's lips touched the chalice, the entire room fell silent, every crystalline being turned toward him, their cores pulsing with bright colors he hadn't seen before. The high matriarch rose from her seat, her form now glowing with an intense white light. James slowly lowered the chalice, his hand trembling. I apologize if I've offended anyone," he stammered. To his surprise, the room erupted in what could only be described as celebration. The crystalline beings began producing musical tones, their bodies resonating at different frequencies that created an otherworldly symphony. The High Matriarch's voice, translated through their communication devices, filled the room. At last, the prophecy is fulfilled. A being of flesh has chosen the chalice of union. The what now? James whispered to Thompson, who had gone pale. Before anyone could explain, the empty chair beside the High Matriarch was suddenly occupied. A slightly smaller crystalline being materialized, seemingly out of thin air. Her form was more delicate than the others, with elegant crystal formations that created what almost looked like flowing hair. Her core pulsed with a soft pink light. James Miller, the High Matriarch announced, "You have chosen to drink from the sacred chalice of union. By our most ancient laws, you have initiated the bonding ritual with my daughter, Starsong." The human delegation burst into confused murmurs while the crystalline beings continued their musical celebration. James sat frozen in his chair, looking between the chalice in his hand and his apparent bride-to-be, who was now studying him with what he hoped was interest rather than hunger. "Surely there's been a mistake," Thompson tried to intervene. Mr. Miller wasn't aware of the chalice's significance. The High Matriarch's core flashed a deep purple. "The chalice chooses, Admiral. It has been waiting for 10,000 years for this moment. To reject its choice would be to reject the very foundations of our society." James finally found his voice. "And if I did reject it, then both our species would enter a state of eternal conflict, as written in our highest laws," the High Matriarch stated matter-of-factly. Starsong, still watching James, suddenly shattered into thousands of tiny crystals, reformed next to his chair, and bent down to examine him more closely. Her core pulsed with what seemed like excitement. James Miller, junior diplomat from Earth, realized he had just accidentally started either an interstellar war or a very unusual engagement. Somehow, the second option seemed more terrifying. The morning after the diplomatic dinner, James found himself in a private chamber aboard the crystalline vessel. The walls pulsed with soft light, and he sat on what appeared to be a chair grown from living crystal. His fiancée, Starsong, floated nearby, her massive form casting prismatic patterns across the room. "I understand this must be overwhelming for you." Starsong's translated voice echoed in the chamber. To demonstrate her point, she casually shattered her entire body into thousands of crystal shards, then reformed into a slightly smaller size, trying to appear less intimidating. It didn't help. James fought the urge to run. That's quite a trick," he managed to say, his voice cracking slightly. "Do all your people do that?" Starsong's core brightened with pleasure at his interest. "Oh no, I'm special. Most can only break into larger chunks. I've mastered microcrystalline reformation." To prove her point, she split into even tinier pieces, creating a swirling galaxy of crystal fragments before reforming again. "Please stop doing that," James whispered, feeling slightly nauseous. A cultural liaison, a human woman named Kate who had studied crystalline society, sat in the corner taking notes. "Mr. Miller, you should know that Starsong is considered quite a catch among her people. She's not just the High Matriarch's daughter. She's also a master of crystal shifting and a renowned scholar of soft-bodied species." Starsong moved closer, her crystal form making a gentle chiming sound. "I've studied humans extensively. Your fluid-filled bodies are fascinating. The way you leak water from your eyes when emotional, how your faces change color with strong feelings, how you're mostly water but don't splash everywhere." Her core pulsed with rapid colors of excitement. James tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "That's wonderful, but surely we can find a way out of this. I mean, we're so different. I'm carbon-based. You're whatever you are. Silicon crystal matrix with quantum consciousness integration." Starsong helpfully supplied, then added proudly, "I can adjust my molecular structure to any formation. Watch." She began to change her crystal pattern. "No more demonstrations, please," James and Kate said simultaneously. Kate cleared her throat. "Mr. Miller, I need to be clear about something. The crystallines are offering Earth their most advanced technologies, trade routes through their space, and military protection, all because they see this marriage as a divine sign. Breaking the engagement would cause an interstellar incident." "Yes, I remember," James sighed. He looked at Starsong, who had formed what appeared to be a crystal flower in her hand. A surprisingly sweet gesture, even if the flower looked sharp enough to cut through steel. "I made this for you," Starsong said shyly, her core turning a soft pink. "I know humans exchange organic growths as signs of affection. I thought perhaps a permanent one would be more practical." James carefully accepted the crystal flower, noting how it caught the light perfectly. Despite his fear, he found himself touched by the gesture. "Thank you. It's beautiful." Starsong's entire form brightened. "Would you like to see my personal chamber? I've adjusted the environmental controls to support human life. Though I should warn you, my pet crystal eater got excited and ate part of the floor last week." "You're what did what now?" James asked weakly. Kate quickly intervened. "Perhaps we should start with something simpler. Starsong, could you tell James about crystalline courtship customs?" "Of course," Starsong chimed happily. "First, we have the trial of molecular harmony, where couples prove their compatibility by surviving in the vacuum of space together. Then there's the resonance challenge, where we vibrate at matching frequencies until one of us shatters. Don't worry, we reform afterward. And finally," James looked desperately at Kate, who was trying not to laugh. Starsong continued enthusiastically describing increasingly terrifying traditions, her core glowing brighter with each description. Through his growing panic, James couldn't help but notice that despite her terrifying appearance and deadly customs, there was something endearing about his alien bride's excitement. He just hoped he'd survive long enough for the wedding. James sat cross-legged on a crystal platform, surrounded by holographic displays showing crystalline customs and traditions. His head was spinning from information overload, while Starsong hovered nearby, projecting educational images through her crystalline body. And remember, she chimed excitedly, during the greeting ceremony, you must vibrate at exactly 432 hertz, or my third cousin might take it as an insult and challenge you to a resonance duel. Starsong, James said carefully, humans can't consciously control their vibration frequency. We're not crystal beings. Oh, her form shimmered with embarrassment, core turning slightly orange. I keep forgetting. You're so fascinating with your constant internal movements. Did you know your heart is beating right now? Amazing. The cultural training session had been going on for 6 hours. James had learned more about crystal-based life forms than he ever thought possible. Some of it was terrifying, some fascinating, and some just plain confusing. Let's practice the traditional couple's dance, Starsong suddenly suggested, reforming herself into a slightly more humanoid shape. I'll try not to accidentally slice you this time. James winced, remembering their first attempt an hour ago. His uniform sleeve still had a neat cut from where her arm had brushed against it. Maybe we should focus on the ceremony first. Of course, you're right, she agreed, projecting a new image. Now, when my mother presents the Unity Shard, you must consume it without. Consume it, James interrupted. You mean eat a crystal. Starsong's core pulsed with what he'd learned was amusement. No, silly fluid being. You just need to hold it in your mouth until it dissolves. It's perfectly safe, I think. We've never tried it with a human before. From the corner, Kate the cultural liaison spoke up. Perhaps we should skip the Unity Shard for now. Starsong, could you tell James about the feast traditions? Oh yes, the Feast of Resonance is beautiful, Starsong exclaimed, her whole form lighting up. Each family brings their most precious minerals. Last time, my aunt brought a radioactive crystal that made the whole room glow. Radioactive. James and Kate exchanged alarmed looks. Don't worry, Starsong assured them. I've been studying human tolerance levels. I'll make sure to keep you at least 20 feet away from the more energetic relatives. James rubbed his temples. Starsong, I appreciate all this, but maybe we could practice something simple. Something that won't potentially kill me. Starsong considered this, her crystal form shifting thoughtfully. Well, there is the quiet contemplation ritual. We simply sit together and synchronize our electromagnetic fields. She paused. Though humans don't generate strong electromagnetic fields, do they? No, we don't. She brightened suddenly. Oh, we could practice the naming ceremony. When we're married, you'll need to learn to pronounce my full name. Starsong of the 7th Resonance, harmony in crystal light breaking through quantum spaces. James stared at her. I thought Starsong was your full name. Oh no, that's just my casual name. My formal name continues for another 12 sequences. Listen. She began producing a series of musical tones that made the crystal walls vibrate. 3 glass panels cracked before Kate could get her to stop. Despite the chaos, James found himself smiling. Yes, his alien bride was terrifying, potentially lethal, and completely alien in every way. But there was something endearing about her earnest attempts to bridge their cultural gap, even if those attempts occasionally threatened his life. Perhaps, he suggested gently, we could create some new traditions, ones that work for both of us. Starsong's core turned a deep warm gold, the color of joy in their species. You would do that? Create new traditions with me. Her form sparkled with excitement, accidentally shooting small crystal shards across the room. Duck, Kate yelled, but she was grinning too. As James picked himself up from behind his crystal desk, he realized that while this might be the strangest cultural exchange in human history, it was certainly never going to be boring. He just needed to work on his ducking skills. The first trial chamber looked like a piece of deep space brought indoors. James stood in his specially designed environmental suit, watching nervously as Starsong floated in the absolute vacuum before him. "Remember," her voice came through his helmet comm, "this trial tests our ability to exist in each other's natural environments. I already proved I can survive in your oxygen atmosphere. Now you just need to last 6 hours in vacuum." 6 hours, James squeaked. "The suit only has 8 hours of air." Starsong's crystal form sparkled with what he now recognized as her laugh. "Don't worry. Most couples do this trial without suits. I convinced Mother you should have protection." Being so squishy, the chamber's airlock hissed shut. James felt the artificial gravity decrease until he floated freely. Starsong split herself into hundreds of crystal fragments, dancing around him in complex patterns that caught the starlight. "Is this really necessary?" he asked, trying to control his breathing. The suit's oxygen meter was already down to 7 hours and 50 minutes. "Of course. How else will we know if you can handle family vacations to the crystal rings?" She reformed beside him, her core pulsing soothingly. "Let's practice space dancing." The next 6 hours involved James learning to maneuver in zero gravity while avoiding Starsong's occasionally sharp edges. He had to admit, watching her create constellation-like patterns with her crystalline form was breathtaking, when it wasn't terrifying. The second trial proved even more challenging. "It's a simple puzzle," Starsong explained, gesturing at the massive crystalline maze before them. "You just need to navigate through while solving the quantum state equations that appear on the walls." James stared at the mathematical symbols floating in the crystal surfaces. "Those aren't equations. They're changing every second." "That's what makes it fun," Starsong chimed. "The solutions create safe paths through the crystal growths. Wrong answers might cause slight problems." "What kind of problems?" A demonstration came when James misread a quantum formula. The crystal floor beneath him began growing spikes rapidly. Only Starsong's quick action, shattering herself to form a crystal bridge, saved him from becoming a human pincushion. "See? Simple," she said cheerfully, reforming beside him. "Only 17 more sections to go." James spent the next 8 hours combining his diplomatic problem-solving skills with half-remembered quantum physics lessons. Starsong helped where she could, though her idea of hints usually involved enthusiastic demonstrations of what would happen if he got it wrong. The third trial, however, was the most daunting. They stood in the resonance chamber, surrounded by Starsong's entire family. The High Matriarch's voice echoed through the space. "The trial of harmony requires both partners to achieve perfect resonance. Their frequencies must match exactly for 1 full minute." James looked at the crystal device attached to his chest, a translator that would supposedly help him match Starsong's resonance frequency. "And if we don't match?" "Then the chamber's crystals might shatter," Starsong said brightly, "along with any solid objects inside it. But don't worry, I'll reform right away." "That's not the part I'm worried about." The trial began. Starsong started humming, her crystal form vibrating at a precise frequency. James tried to match it using the device, which sent vibrations through his body. The chamber's walls began to sing in response. Too high, the crystals screeched. Too low, they groaned dangerously. Just right. And suddenly James felt it. A perfect harmony, as if he and Starsong were creating music together. Her core glowed with pure white light, and for a moment, he forgot to be afraid. The minute passed. The chamber erupted in musical tones as the crystalline family celebrated. Starsong, overjoyed, accidentally shattered and reformed around James in what was essentially a crystal being's version of a hug. "You did it," she chimed, and with only minimal crystalline structural damage to the chamber. James, catching his breath, looked at the cracked walls and back to his enthusiastic fiancée. Despite everything, the danger, the terror, the constant threat of being sliced, crushed, or shattered, he found himself smiling. He had survived the 3 trials. Now he just had to survive the wedding. The High Matriarch's private chamber was a cathedral of living crystal, constantly shifting and growing. James stood before Starsong's mother, trying not to show his nervousness as the 15-foot-tall crystal being examined him. "So, flesh child," the matriarch's voice resonated through the chamber, "you wish to join our ancient lineage?" "Yes, your crystalline majesty," James replied, proud that his voice only shook slightly. "Though technically, Starsong chose me by leaving that chalice." "The chalice chooses," the matriarch interrupted, her core flashing with multiple colors. "But the family tests." Without warning, the floor beneath James turned transparent. He found himself standing on what appeared to be an endless void of space. He stumbled but managed to stay upright, remembering Starsong's lessons about crystalline tests. "Good," the matriarch hummed. "You understand that appearance isn't always reality." The floor became solid again. Suddenly, a smaller crystal being materialized. Sharp Edge, Starsong's cousin. His jagged form radiated hostility. "Matriarch, I must object to this union. How can a soft being possibly understand our ways?" James noticed something odd about Sharp Edge's core. It pulsed with an unusual pattern he'd learned about during his cultural training. "Excuse me," he said carefully, "but isn't that core pattern a sign of resonance manipulation?" The chamber went silent. Sharp Edge's form flickered with surprise. "Explain," the matriarch commanded. "Starsong taught me about core patterns. That particular oscillation suggests artificial frequency enhancement, which is forbidden during formal proceedings, isn't it?" The matriarch's form grew even larger. "Sharp Edge, you dare enter my chamber with a modified core." Sharp Edge shattered into pieces and quickly reformed, his core now showing its natural pattern. I only wish to ensure my objection would be heard clearly. By breaking our most sacred laws." The matriarch's voice made the entire chamber vibrate. "Leave us." After Sharp Edge's hasty departure, the matriarch turned back to James. "You protected our traditions while exposing deception." "Interesting. I've been studying," James said. "Starsong is very thorough in her teaching methods, sometimes terrifyingly so." A sound like crystal wind chimes filled the room. The matriarch was laughing. "Yes, my daughter can be quite intense. Yet you haven't fled." "No, I haven't." James straightened his back. "Despite the constant fear of being accidentally crystallized, sliced, or shattered, I've come to appreciate Starsong's enthusiasm. She makes me see the universe differently." The matriarch's core shifted to a deep blue. "Tell me, human, what do you see when you look at my daughter?" James thought carefully. "I see someone who could easily terrify me, but chooses to make me laugh instead. Someone who gets so excited about sharing her culture that she sometimes forgets I'm breakable. Someone who's trying just as hard to understand my world as I am to understand hers, even though she could kill you by accident." "Well," James smiled, "I could die slipping in the shower. At least with Starsong, death would be spectacular." The matriarch's form sparkled with amusement. "You jest about your mortality. Most soft beings we meet live in constant fear of us." "Oh, I'm absolutely terrified," James admitted. "But Starsong makes it worth it." The matriarch studied him for a long moment. Finally, her core brightened. "Perhaps the chalice chose wisely after all. Though I suggest you watch Sharp Edge and his faction. They will not give up easily." "I understand," James nodded. "In human diplomacy, we have a saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer." "Ah." The matriarch chimed, "In our culture, we say, watch which crystals reflect true light and which merely pretend to shine." As James left the chamber, he found Starsong waiting anxiously outside. "How did it go? Did Mother try to crystallize you?" "She only does that to people she likes." James looked at his enthusiastic fiancée and smiled. "No crystallization today. But I think she approves." Starsong's entire form lit up with joy. accidentally sending rainbow refractions across the corridor that temporarily blinded 3 passing servants. "Oops," she chimed, still working on controlling my happiness emissions. The grand ceremonial chamber glittered like 1,000 stars, with crystalline beings of all sizes floating in a circular formation around the central platform. James stood in his ceremonial suit, specially designed to withstand both vacuum and potential crystal shards, while Starsong hovered beside him, her form more radiant than ever. "Remember," she whispered, "when the resonance crystal appears, we must both touch it at exactly the same moment." The High Matriarch floated above them, her massive form creating rainbow cascades throughout the chamber. "We gather today to witness the union of crystal and flesh, as foretold in the ancient harmonics." The ceremony began smoothly enough. The traditional crystal chimes sang through the chamber, creating complex harmonies that made James's suit vibrate. He had just started to relax when he noticed something odd about the crystals near Sharp Edge and his supporters. They were vibrating at a different frequency. Before he could warn Starsong, the resonance crystal, a massive, perfect gem that would bind their union, emerged from the chamber center. As it rose, the discordant frequencies from Sharp Edge's group grew stronger. "Starsong," James whispered urgently, "the harmonic pattern is wrong." She noticed it too, her core pulsing with alarm. "They're trying to shatter the resonance crystal. If it breaks during the ceremony, it's considered an omen of doom. The marriage would be forbidden." The crystal began to show stress lines as the competing frequencies built up. The High Matriarch, focused on the ceremonial words, hadn't noticed yet. James had seconds to act. Then he remembered something from his physics classes. "Starsong, can you match my frequency exactly?" "Of course, but trust me." James reached out and grabbed the resonance crystal with one hand and Starsong's crystal arm with the other. He began humming at the lowest frequency he could manage, well below the damaging resonance Sharp Edge was creating. Starsong caught on immediately. She matched his frequency and amplified it, sending the deep vibration through the crystal. Other family members, realizing what was happening, joined in. Sharp Edge's group tried to increase their disruptive frequency, but physics was on James's side. The lower frequency overwhelmed the higher one, stabilizing the resonance crystal. It began to glow with an intense inner light. The High Matriarch's voice boomed through the chamber. "The attempt to disrupt this union has failed. Sharp Edge, you and your conspirators will face the crystal courts." But James barely heard her. The moment his hand had touched the resonance crystal, all connected to Starsong, something extraordinary happened. He could feel her presence, not just physically but somehow deeper, as if their consciousness had briefly merged. Starsong's form was changing too. The crystal structure that made up her body began shifting, responding to their shared connection. Her usual terrifying appearance transformed into something new, still crystalline, still alien, but with an otherworldly beauty that took James's breath away. "I didn't know you could do that," he whispered. "Neither did I," she chimed softly. I think the crystal is showing my true form, the way I feel when I'm with you." The High Matriarch, recovering from the excitement of thwarting Sharp Edge's plot, continued the ceremony. "Through crisis, these two have proven their harmony. Let their union be sealed in the eternal resonance." The chamber erupted in crystal song as the marriage was confirmed. Sharp Edge and his conspirators were led away by crystal guards, their cores dim with shame. Starsong, still in her transformed state, turned to James. "You saved our wedding by understanding crystal physics better than my own people." "Well," James smiled, "I had an excellent teacher, even if she did accidentally crystallize my hair during those lessons." "That only happened twice," Starsong protested, then added hopefully, "Would now be a bad time to mention that the reception involves dancing through a meteor shower." James looked at his new wife, her crystal form shimmering with joy and mischief, and laughed. "With or without the spacesuit?" "With. I want you to survive at least until the honeymoon in the plasma fields. The assembled crystal beings chimed with laughter as James's face paled slightly. Somehow, he had a feeling married life was going to be an adventure, if he could just avoid being accidentally shattered, crystallized, or vaporized along the way. 6 months after the wedding, James sat in their hybrid living quarters aboard the crystalline diplomatic vessel, watching his wife rearrange her form to create a dazzling light show for visiting human delegates. And this, Star Song chimed proudly, splitting into thousands of prismatic shards, is how we celebrate successful trade negotiations. The delegates applauded, though James noticed they kept a safe distance. He'd learned early in their marriage that humans needed time to adjust to Star Song's enthusiastic displays. Their living space reflected their unique union. One half maintained Earth normal conditions, while the other half could switch to vacuum for Star Song's comfort. The border between the two zones was marked by a shimmering energy field that had taken 3 engineering teams to perfect. Ambassador Miller, one delegate asked, "How do you manage daily life with such different environmental needs?" James smiled, watching Star Song reform herself into a crystalline representation of Earth's solar system. "We adapt." Star Song learned to warn me before switching to her vacuum form, and I learned to duck when she gets excited and accidentally shoots crystal shards. "Only 3 incidents this month," Star Song added cheerfully. Their marriage had become something of a sensation across both species. Humans were fascinated by the possibility of peaceful coexistence with such an alien race, while the crystallines saw it as proof of their ancient prophecies. The diplomatic benefits had exceeded all expectations. Trade routes through crystalline space had opened up vast new opportunities for humanity. In return, humans shared their art, music, and culture with the crystal beings, who found human creativity endlessly fascinating. "My favorite human invention is still bubble wrap," Star Song announced to the delegates. "The way it makes tiny explosions without actually destroying anything. Genius." James remembered the day he introduced her to bubble wrap. She'd been so excited she'd accidentally crystallized half their furniture trying to replicate the effect. Their personal life had settled into an unusual but comfortable routine. Mornings were spent in their respective environments, afternoons dedicated to diplomatic work, and evenings trying to find activities they could both enjoy. "Show them your latest project," James suggested. Star Song brightened literally and figuratively. She projected a holographic image from her core, a design for a new type of space station. By combining human architectural concepts with crystalline growth patterns, we can create self-repairing habitats suitable for both species. The delegates leaned forward, intrigued. This was why James and Star Song had become such effective ambassadors. They didn't just represent cooperation between species, they actively created new ways for their peoples to work together. After the delegation left, Star Song shifted to her more relaxed form, the one she only showed around James. "Do you ever regret drinking from that chalice?" she asked softly, her core pulsing with gentle colors. James reached out to touch her crystalline surface, feeling the warm resonance that always passed between them. "Only when you get excited during movies and accidentally turn the couch into crystal." "That was one time," she protested, then added, "Well, maybe 3 times, but I reformed it perfectly." "True, though it's still a bit sparkly." Their laughter mixed together, his human chuckles and her crystal chimes creating their own unique harmony. A message alert chimed. The High Matriarch's image appeared, her massive form barely contained by the holographic projector. "Children, wonderful news. The Crystal Council has approved your proposal for the Joint Human Crystalline Academy." "That's great, Mother," Star Song chimed, though we should probably mention the small safety issue with the crystalline diving pool. "Minor details," the matriarch waved dismissively. "Oh, and James, your parents' environmental suits are ready for their visit next month. This time we made them extra resistant to accidental crystallization." After the call ended, James and Star Song looked at each other, one a fragile human, the other a being of living crystal, and shared a moment of quiet appreciation for their bizarre but wonderful life together. Should we tell them about your idea for crystal human fusion cuisine? Starsong asked mischievously. Let's wait until after my parents' visit, James suggested, one cultural shock at a time. And so their story continued, part diplomatic triumph, part cosmic joke, part love story, and all adventure. They were living proof that in an infinite universe, the strangest matches sometimes made the most sense, even if one partner occasionally had to wear protective gear to kiss the other goodnight.